Hey, how you doing? Today, I thought I'd talk a little bit about a guy I used to call a bullseye buddy. Back when I was on the carrier, I was temporary duty assigned to the brig. And the guy we used to call bullseye buddy, our desk was, say, here at the cell wall of the first cell. And bullseye buddy had top priority. He was right there in cell number one. So the reason he was in there and why we called him Bullseye Buddy was he decided one night during flight ops when they were launching F-14s that he was going to spray paint a bullseye target on his chest and run out in front of an F-14 as it was getting ready to launch. Now, you would have to think to yourself, nobody in their right mind would do that. And that's true. He wasn't in his right mind. Because an F-14, not only is it hooked onto the catapult that's going to launch it off of the front of the ship, but it has like 10 foot of flame coming out the back of the engines as it's revving up to launch. No one, and I used to think no matter how crazy they were, would run out in front of an F-14 getting ready to launch, but he decided one night it would be a good idea. Well, that's what landed him in the front cell, and he was there for the whole duration that I was assigned to there, which was practically at least half of a 7-month cruise. So that's where he was, and every day the medical officers would come down and feed him Thorazine to try to keep him under control. It didn't really work that well because one day the chief of our department came down the steps and he was going to go in to have a talk with this guy and just sort of check up on him, make sure he was okay as he could be. But that was the chief's job. And so the chief came down and we were on watch, and he said, open the main cell door. And we have levers behind us, switches, that when you toggle that switch, electrically, the mechanism opens to open that door. So he went in through the first door and shut that door, which was sort of an area in between 6 or 8 of the cells. So then the chief said, open cell door 1. Now, he told our buddy, I'm going to come in and just have a talk with you. Don't panic. There's nothing wrong. Just got to do a normal, routine mental exam. Make sure you're okay. So he told us, okay, open cell door 1. So we hit the lever to open cell door 1. The chief went in, shut the door, and Bullseye Buddy just attacked him. I mean, this was not a small individual. First of all, this guy was over 6 foot and hefty, big, brawny guy. And our chief was, maybe a little bit shorter than me, physically fit enough, but not a huge guy. And this guy just jumped on him. And my workmate and I were looking at him like, okay, we know we can't leave our post. We can't, go in there. So what we do is we have another buzzer that rings a bell in the upstairs compartment where other people in our division are, whether they're on duty or just hanging around watching TV or something. So we rang the buzzer for them to get down here. They came running down, 2 or 3 of them, and we opened the cell doors in order so they could get in there to where the chief was being attacked. And the chief was able to hold his own. He was doing fairly well, but the 3 of them then got the situation under control, and the chief was like, okay, this is just another mark against you, and off he went. Now, there was already several marks against Bullseye Buddy. Ignoring the fact that he wasn't mentally doing too well, there's also the fact that he's being charged, and I'm 99% sure would have ended up in a court-martial because he, number one, by running out in front of an F-14, he's endangering government property, which was himself. The government looks at that as though you don't just work for them. They figure if you injure yourself, and your government property, then their view is you're endangering government property. So he's being charged for that, along with the fact of running in front of an F-14 like that. He's delaying mission accomplishment goals. So of course, they weren't able to launch that F-14 because he's standing there in front of it. So they got to take a while, get him out of the way, and then continue with operations. So he's also being charged with that. And now, attacking the chief, he's being charged with that as well. Now, you have to realize, too, at the same time, any time you're in something like the brig, your enlistment stops. Time, normally, let's say you were enlisted for 4 years. January of this year till January of the next year, that's a year. Okay, time keeps ticking away on your enlistment, but not when you're in a brig. And that's true of any holding cell situation, someplace like Leavenworth or something. If you got sentenced to 3 years in Leavenworth, your enlistment is on pause, and the time doesn't count that you're in a holding facility. So you might have only had 2 years left by the time you went to prison. And you got 3 years in prison. Well, it doesn't work like, after 2 years your enlistment's up. No, that time is on pause. So if you had 2 years left when you went into a prison and you got 3 years in prison, you had 2 years left when you came out of the prison, because none of that time is counted toward good service, like active service. And obviously, you're not doing your job. You're sitting in prison, so. So for the 6 months that Bullseye Buddy was in the brig there on the carrier, that doesn't count even toward his enlistment. So I don't know whatever happened to him. Like I said, I left the brig, shortly before that cruise was over, and he was still there, and he wasn't showing any signs of going anywhere. Now, more than likely, when we got back to the port, they would have moved him to sort of a correctional facility on a land base somewhere. You know, they wouldn't just keep him there on the ship. That's not, that wouldn't even make sense. The ship only has a certain number of cells, and we didn't just like keep people there indefinitely. They, once we got back into port, they would move them to a port somewhere on another base, and they would just keep them there until they ended up at court martial or something, and then they would get sentenced by the jury judge type scenario, sort of like the civilian world. Always keep in mind, beware of what you're doing. Don't end up in a brig somewhere, and don't let yourself mentally snap, because Bullseye Buddy was okay at a certain point, but he just lost it. Obviously, if you're running out in front of an F-14, you lost it. So, but that's the story of Bullseye Buddy, as we called him. Don't let yourself get to the point where you snap. Talk to people, get some help. There's plenty of places around to get help, especially today. So until the next time, take care of yourself, and I'll see you later.